the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. I wish to extend my thanks to the UMAA executive for giving me this chance to meet and speak to you all this evening. Brothers and sisters, it's a great event to be together at. I'm here tonight to tell you a little bit about how it comes to be that a journalist from the United Kingdom, at a time of rising Islamophobia, at a time when the media works very, very hard to paint Islam as the biggest threat to world security, how on earth that person who's also related to a former prime minister who led the shameful attack on Iraq and Afghanistan and the Muslim world, how his sister-in-law stands before you as a Muslim. I was talking to our sister here, Nicole, and we are reminded when we come to Islam of fitra, that knowledge that children have of God, that society works very hard on driving out of us as we grow up. And we were talking a little bit earlier about how we all get signposts from Allah during our lives to come back, whether or not you're born into a family of Muslims, because actually there's no such thing as someone who is guaranteed a life as a Muslim. You can be born with the fitra inside you, but you have to work at being a Muslim through your life. So we all have these signposts. Please don't think that people who are, alhamdulillah, very, very lucky, like myself and Nicole, that we suddenly have an awakening, a signpost that's very clear to us. You are having these all the time. May Allah allow you to recognize them. So it was that as a child in North London, I prayed. My family was broadly Christian. My father was a lapsed Catholic, my mother a superstitious Christian who would not go to church but would hang crosses around the rooms to ward off evil spirits. And I always prayed to God, not to Jesus and God, just to God. I remember as a 7-year-old, my simple prayer would go something like this: "Dear God, please take my sister away for a few days. You can bring her back, but just a few days, God." But you know, as we grow up in secular Christian societies, the ego is encouraged and the knowledge of Allah, of God, is mocked, scorned, discouraged, murdered by consumerism and commercialism. And so as I became a teenager, like many of us, I joined the cult of me. I was the greatest thing in the universe. I made my luck. I got my exam grades. I was clever and pretty, and if anything changed in the world, it was because of me. And that lasted all the way up until my first signpost. We're here to talk about the journey to Islam. Well, I place mine back to the year 2000. I was sitting in my living room watching a news broadcast on the BBC when a photograph came up that stopped my life in its tracks. As we're in America and it's Memorial Day today, I'll give you an example of another photograph that changed the world. And this one was of a little girl with napalm on her back in the early 1970s, running from her burning village in Cambodia. That helped to cause the end of a war, and we can see that image even now in the back of our retinas. Well, this image was on my television, and it was of a boy, 15 years old, and he had a stone in his right hand. And his back was so straight, and his arm looked so powerful, that it was as if he didn't see the tank, the Israeli tank, just 10 feet from him, pointing its gun towards him. That boy's name was Faris Odeh. 9 days later, he was shot dead by an Israeli sniper, shot in the neck, dead at aged 15. But I didn't know that then. I just knew that something in that photograph told me that what I knew about the world, the Arab world and the Muslim world, was not right. But I put that to one side, or at least I thought I did, because actually I wasn't controlling my life at all, was I? In fact, it's funny to think that just a year and a half ago, had I walked into that door and seen me now, standing in front of you in an abaya and a hijab, I would have said, no way. So you see, really have to give up thinking that we control anything. In 2005, with the memory of Faris Odeh and that photograph still burning in my mind, obviously, I found myself walking into my editor's office at the Mail on Sunday and saying a very strange thing. I'd like to go to Palestine. Now, at that time, I was writing mostly about lifestyle columns. Yes, I was writing about haircuts, about having children, moving house, and a little bit about politics. But I knew nothing, really, about the Middle East. You know what? I didn't even know that it got cold in Palestine in January. I thought it was like Saudi Arabia. So it was very strange that my editor said, go and cover the elections in Palestine, and that I found myself in the West Bank. The next day, after arriving in Tel Aviv airport, I was in Ramallah. And I remember standing with the armed guards of Mahmoud Abbas. And everybody's armed guards, when you're a leader, are very big. But these were very, very, very big Arabs with very, very, very big guns. And as I stood with one of them either side of me, and they locked me into a very big metal grid elevator, one of them, his radio went off. And he said something into it that sounded to my English ears like this. And in my mind, the subtitle read, "We'll kill the white woman later." And I realized at that moment that I had Arabophobia. Not a good place to realize it. And that somehow I had absorbed all of that imagery, all of that negativity about what we call the Middle East. And we have to think of a new term for that because it's based on British colonialism. And that I was afraid of Islam. But alhamdulillah, 72 hours in Palestine is a long time. And just 3 days later, I would have given my life for any single person that I met, for the love, the fadal, and the kindness that they showed to me, a stranger in that land. And something else about Palestine, for those of you who haven't been, and a reminder for those who have, is the barakah of Allah in the Holy Land. When you go to holy places, you feel it. So, clearly, something was going on in my life. I went back to the UK and thought again, I'll just get on with my life. But a strange thing happened. The CEO of the Islam channel, a man called Muhammad Ali, came up to me one day at an event like this and said, "We want you to be a presenter at the Islam channel." I said, "Okay, I'm not Muslim and I'm not going to be Muslim." No problem. Don't pressure me to be Muslim because I'm not it. No problem, Lauren. It's okay. And also, I'm not going to wear the hijab, ever. It's okay. We don't expect you to. We just think you're a good presenter. I started to spend time with Muslims in Britain, traveling the world doing interviews. And it was as if these people lived in a separate dimension. So we were traveling along the same paths, sometimes eating the same meals, but they were somewhere else. Like the spirit of the people and the heart of the people was in a cleaner, better space. And I couldn't quite figure out how that worked, but I was becoming curious. In 2008, I joined 46 Europeans and Americans, mostly women, on a crazy voyage to try and break the siege of Gaza. 2 little ships left Cyprus in August 2008. And 36 sickening hours later, one of the skippers climbed the mast and said the magic words, "Land ahoy," and there in the distance was Gaza rising. I'll never forget it. For 44 years, the Palestinians had waited under occupation and then siege for ships to come that weren't the enemy. And suddenly, bizarrely, 2 of the lowliest ships ever to try that journey appeared on their horizon. I'll never forget that day and the days that followed, because the suffering of the oppressed in this ummah, everywhere in this ummah, is here as a reminder to us about how to practice our faith. The people of Gaza and Palestine teach us Alhamdulillah. And I'll tell you how. It was Ramadan, that magical month, that special month when the doors of Jannah are opened and we're just that bit closer. And I was in Gaza and I went to Rafah. And I went to a family in a very, very poor condition. And by poor condition, I mean, if you imagine a cement block with a door in it and no furniture inside and very little to eat, you'll get the idea. But when I knocked on this particular door, the mother of the house opened it like this. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Fadal. She was so happy, it was as if she was inviting me into the Taj Mahal. Not an empty garage. I went and sat down and I felt angry. I felt angry because she was fasting and her family were fasting, and I didn't understand how hungry people could fast. And it didn't make sense to me. And I said to her, "Sister, with due respect, why does your God make you fast in Ramadan? You're already hungry. You don't have good water here. You don't have good food. Tell me, because I just don't understand." And this mother of Gaza said, "Sister, I fast to remember the poor." At that moment, a key went into my heart. And the words, "If this is Islam, I'm in," came very clearly to me. But you know, Allah does not call us the insan, the forgetful, for nothing, because guess what? The second I left her house, I forgot that thought. And I carried on with my life. But we have to get dawah. Every person who comes to Islam has to do the learning. It's not about liking people and liking falafel. That's just being a tourist. And so I was getting dawah from one particular source, and it's quite an amazing source, from Somalian taxi drivers in North London. May Allah reward them with Jannah, because these people are the silent revolution. You cannot get into a taxi in North London without those Somali brothers saying Assalamu alaikum, whether or not you're Muslim. Have you heard of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his wives, and this happened and that happened? And I was starting to love the Prophet. But you know, since becoming Muslim, I get into those taxis now and they have just one question for me. Are you married? I miss the lectures, to be quite honest. Where's the learning, brother? Alhamdulillah. Of course, we also need to get knowledge of the Quran when we're coming to Islam. And I was walking along the streets of Old Jerusalem, Old Al-Quds, one day, having visited Gaza. And a young man fell in step next to me. I was late for my plane. I had 40 minutes. I was in a rush. He said, "Salaam alaikum." I said, "Wa alaikum salam." Looked around. He said, what can I do for you? I said, look, I haven't got time really to have a discussion. And I was a bit mean. And the Palestinian people have never been mean to me. And I stopped myself. I went, why are you being like this? This is a young man who's just saying salam. Don't. I said, I'm sorry. He said, what can I do for you? I said, okay, I need to buy some presents and gifts, and I'm in a hurry. He said, I'll help you. He said, what do you need? I said, 2 stuffed camels for my daughters, a ceremonial Arabic knife for my husband, and a copy of the Quran in English, and somebody wanted a mother-of-pearl photograph of Yasser Arafat. He said, no problem, we'll find it. In 35 minutes, we went to all of his uncle's shops, and I came out with the bags, and I said to him, thank you very much, how much do I owe you? He said, please, this is from the people of Palestine, don't forget us. I never saw him again. And when I got home, I realized it was time to look at the Quran. I took some time, I sat down quietly, prepared myself, and I opened the Quran at Al-Fatiha. But it didn't welcome me. It said, this is a powerful book, it's not for you, close this book and move away. Now that's amazing when you think about it. And yet we are told by Allah, those who come in disbelief or whose hearts aren't prepared will only increase in disbelief by this book. So we must be careful when we say, have a Quran willy-nilly, because Allah prepares the hearts for the Quran. Now we must encourage people to come to Islam, but they will only understand the Quran and it will only reach us when we are prepared. And my preparation happened in 2010. I went to Iran to cover the Al-Quds Day parade as a journalist. Almost 1 million Iranians there crying for Al-Aqsa, crying for the Palestinian people. It was very, very moving as a journalist. And I had one day off. And on that one day, a sister said to me, you should go to Esfahan. I said, fine. So Esfahan is, people will know, 5 hours, I think, from Tehran. We got halfway, and guess what? It was Ramadan. I forgot to mention, Ramadan again. And we reached Qom just at the time of Iftar, Maghrib time. So the sister said, come in, see how people love their faith in Iran. Come and see the brothers and sisters. So I put on a chador and I made wudu because I knew how to do it. I'd been around Muslims enough to understand that. And I went inside and I saw all of the sisters there. And I made one of my first da'ah ever using the word Allah. And it was simple. I just said, Allah, I don't want to ask you for anything because you've given me everything. I have such a nice life. But please bless Palestine. And then I sat down and prepared as a tourist to watch all of the Muslim women with their children. But as I sat down, it was as if I was under a waterfall of peace. A cascade of calm came over me. My breath slowed. All I could do was look at my hands. Some sisters started coming over and they said something about meditation to Nargis, who is on my left. And I thought from very, very far away, yes, this probably is meditation. But I don't know how I got here and I'm not making it happen. And I knew at that moment, that long, long moment, that somewhere in the universe, it's that calm and peaceful all the time. Just think of it. All of the silly anxieties we make, all of the problems, all of our little worries and frictions, none of it matters. Because the universe is a place of peace, if we can only get there. I sat for a long time, I don't know how long, and eventually my friend Nargis said, we should probably go now, I haven't had iftar. I said, oh, I'm sorry. And I felt very dizzy and a bit sick. We went a little way and then we came back and she said, we should go to Esfahan now. I said, do you mind if I sleep on the floor of the mosque tonight? And she said, no, alhamdulillah, no problem. And her mother and I and Nargis slept on the floor of the Bibi Fatima Mazuma shrine in Qom overnight.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
At one point during that wonderful evening, a sister who I'd never met came over to me and she sat opposite me, apropos nothing. Remember, I just had a shodor on and I was just sitting quietly, and she put her hands on my shoulders and she looked in my eyes and said, I love you. And I felt love flowing between us as if she was my granddaughter, as if I was her mother and she was my aunt, as if I'd known her forever. And I realized at that moment that I was no longer a tourist in Islam, I was inside the Ummah.
Takbir.
When I came back to Britain, I wore the hijab, and several other amazing things happened. I don't know if we've got time today, but alhamdulillah, when you very suddenly come to Islam, it's very, shall we say, surprising to go from a secular Christian past to suddenly realize the Quran is real, heaven's real, hell's real, Allah's real, the Prophet. It's a bit like you're going to faint. And luckily there's a voice inside that says, it's okay. Just take it slowly and you'll be fine. This is good for you. And you find your way. And my daughters put it in context for me. I said to them, okay, girls, Mummy's thinking about becoming Muslim. What do you think? Now, my daughters are 9 and 11. Everybody here who has daughters will know what they're like. They gave the girls' answer, we're going to make a list of questions. We'll get back to you. So they came back in 15 minutes and they had a list of questions. And question number 1 was this. Mummy, when you are a Muslim, will you still be mummy? I said, yeah, I'll still be mummy. In fact, I'll be a better mummy. And question number 2 was, when you are a Muslim, will you still drink alcohol? That was hard for me. I took a breath and I said, if I'm Muslim, I'll never drink alcohol again. And my daughter said, hooray! Question number 3 was, when you're a Muslim, will you show your chest in public? I said, do what now? Why are you asking this? And my daughter Holly said, because you always wear low-cut tops and we have male teachers and it embarrasses us if they look there and we want you to stop it. I said, if I'm Muslim, I will always be covered in a modest way in public. And Holly stood up and said, I love Islam. Alhamdulillah, a year and a half later, my daughters pray with me. Thanks be to God for that. And my eldest daughter will wear hijab from September, her choice, inshallah. She's very happy. And I just want to end with how I returned to the Quran. Finally, having said my shahada before having actually accessed the Quran. Can you imagine? I was talking with Sister Nicole earlier and she said, sometimes people get invitations, sometimes they get a mallet over the head. I got an Islamic mallet over my head and I had to become a Muslim. I said my shahada and then I opened the Quran. And it said, welcome to the true faith of peace. Where have you been? Welcome. You will find love here. And that is the end, and all I want to say is that my life now is as if I've been a character. I've been the character in The Truman Show, if anybody's seen that. Like I was living in a soap opera beforehand, on the set of a film perhaps, and behind a door was this whole other universe of truth. And thanks be to God, He's allowed me to enter this door. All mistakes are my own and all praises for Allah. Jazakallah khair.